My name is Michael, and if you've ever trusted someone so deeply that you let them into your family, your finances, and even your future, you'll understand the pain of what I'm about to tell you. I'm not talking about some distant acquaintance or a stranger on the street. I'm talking about a man I once called my brother. A man who stood beside me when I opened my business, who toasted with me on holidays, who played catch with my kids in the backyard. That same man, Ethan, nearly destroyed everything I worked for. When I look back now, the betrayal feels obvious, like all the warning signs were flashing in front of me. But when you're living it, you don't see the cracks right away. You only see the trust, the shared dreams, and the hope that someone has your back the way you have theirs. That was me, blinded by loyalty. I wasn't born into privilege. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood where hard work was the only currency that mattered. I worked shifts through college, saved every dollar I could, and eventually built a small but thriving logistics business. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every contract signed, every truck on the road, it all carried my name, my sweat, and my sacrifice. But no business grows alone. That's when Ethan entered the picture. At first, he was everything I thought I needed. Sharp, ambitious, someone who shared the same hunger I had. He had a way with people that I didn't. He could light up a room and make investors feel comfortable. I was the grinder, the one who made sure the wheels kept turning, and he was the smooth talker who kept the big clients close. Together, we felt unstoppable. I trusted him completely, too completely. He knew my passwords, had access to our books, and even held power of attorney for certain contracts. Looking back now, I realize I practically handed him the keys to my kingdom. But in the moment, it felt right. It felt like I finally had a partner who cared about my dream as much as I did. Before I go on, let me pause here for a second. If you've ever trusted someone, only to find they stabbed you in the back, you'll understand exactly why this story cuts so deep. And if you've ever felt that sting, I know you'll connect with what I'm about to share. So if this resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe. You don't want to miss the rest of this story, or others like it, because betrayal is something we've all faced in one way or another. Back then, I didn't see betrayal. I saw friendship. Ethan and I would sit late at night in the office, sipping cheap coffee while dreaming about expansion, opening branches in other states, hiring more staff, doubling our fleet. He'd slap me on the back and say, "Mike, we're going to take this company to the moon." I believed him. I invited him into my life. He was at my daughter's birthday party, clapping the loudest when she blew out the candles. He was at my table every Thanksgiving, carving turkey beside me like he belonged there. My wife trusted him, my kids adored him, and I considered him family. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those closest to you. I had no idea that while Ethan was laughing with my kids and shaking my hand across the desk, he was also quietly laying the foundation to push me out of the very company I had built with my own two hands. And that, my friends, is where my nightmare began. The first real crack appeared so small I almost ignored it. I remember sitting in my office one Thursday morning, buried under invoices, when my assistant Jenna knocked on the door. She looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should even say anything. "Michael," she said quietly, "did you know Ethan signed a supplier contract last week? It's a pretty big one." I frowned. Ethan handled a lot of negotiations, yes, but he never finalized deals without running them by me first. That was our rule. We both signed off before anything major got stamped. "Which supplier?" I asked. She slid the folder across my desk. I skimmed it. A new shipping partner with rates that didn't make sense. Higher costs, longer delivery routes. On the surface, it was a bad deal. But buried in the fine print, I noticed something else. Clauses that gave the supplier a strange amount of power over us. Things Ethan and I usually caught immediately. I brushed it off at first. Maybe Ethan saw an angle I didn't, I told myself. After all, we trusted each other. If he signed something, there had to be a reason. But my gut wouldn't let it go. Later that day, I cornered Ethan in the break room. He was pouring himself coffee, whistling like everything in the world was fine. "Hey," I said casually, "I saw the new supplier contract. You didn't think to run it by me?" He froze for a split second, then flashed me that easy smile of his. "Oh, that. Yeah, Mike, don't worry. I had to move quick. Timing was critical. Trust me, this deal's gonna save us in the long run." He clapped me on the shoulder and walked away like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. The second crack came a week later. I was leaving the office late, and as I passed Ethan's door, I noticed it was ajar. He was inside, talking on the phone. His voice was low, sharp, the kind of tone he never used with me or clients. "I told you, once I'm in full control, we'll make our move. He won't know what hit him." I stopped dead in the hallway. My stomach dropped. My first thought was, he can't be talking about me. He had to be talking about a competitor, maybe a supplier, maybe something else, anything else. But then he said it. "Michael's too trusting. He doesn't see the bigger picture. Once the board sees the numbers I'll present, they'll side with me, and he'll be out." I remember gripping the wall to steady myself. My head was spinning. Ethan, my partner, my friend, the man I treated like family, was plotting to push me out of my own company? I wanted to storm in, confront him right there, but something in me held back. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was instinct. I eased away quietly and walked out of the building into the cool night air, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might split my chest. That night I barely slept. Every memory of Ethan replayed in my head like a cruel film. His laughter with my kids, his promises about the company, his handshakes, his pats on the back, and all of it, I realized, was a mask. The betrayal burned like acid. But I couldn't just accuse him outright, not without proof. Ethan was charming, persuasive. If I went to the board without evidence, he'd twist it, make me look paranoid. I had to be careful. I had to play this smart. So I started watching, listening. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things I had overlooked before. Small changes. Ethan meeting clients alone more often. Staff whispering about his promises of new directions for the company. Memos circulated with his signature, but not mine. Each piece by itself seemed harmless, but together it painted a clear picture. Ethan wasn't just testing boundaries, he was systematically cutting me out. The hardest part was keeping my face neutral. At work, I had to smile, laugh, and pretend like everything was fine. At home, I had to reassure my wife that business was steady, that nothing was wrong. Inside, though, I felt like I was living in a collapsing house. The worst moment came when I overheard Ethan talking to one of our biggest clients. I had walked into the office early and caught the tail end of the call. "Don't worry," he said smoothly. "Once the paperwork is finalized, I'll be the one running things. Michael will still have his title, but he won't be making decisions anymore." It hit me like a punch in the gut. He wasn't just scheming, he was already telling people I'd be sidelined. And that's when something inside me shifted. I stopped thinking like the victim. I stopped asking, why would he do this to me? And started asking, how do I stop him? Ethan thought I was naive, too trusting to see what was happening. What he didn't realize was that when you've built something from the ground up, when you've poured years of sweat and sacrifice into it, you don't just roll over. You fight. And I was about to start fighting back. From that night on, everything about the way I saw Ethan changed. Before, I had looked at him as a friend, even a brother. Now, every handshake felt like a knife behind my back. But I couldn't let him see that. If I showed my hand too soon, he'd bury me before I had a chance to stop him. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I pretended. Every morning I walked into that office with a smile plastered on my face. I nodded at Ethan, asked about his weekend, even laughed at his jokes. But inside, I was cataloging everything. Every contract he signed without me, every meeting he took alone, every email that slipped through without my name copied. The first thing I did was bring in Jenna, quietly. She had been with me for years, loyal to the bone. I trusted her. One evening, after the office had emptied, I asked her to stay behind. She sat across from me, brow furrowed. "What's going on, Michael?" I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I need your help, and I need your silence. Do you understand?" She nodded. "Ethan is trying to push me out. I don't have proof yet, but I need to build a record. From now on, every document, every email, every contract that crosses his desk, I want copies. Quietly. Don't ask questions, don't let him see you. Just file them in a folder for me." Her eyes widened. "Michael, if this is true—" "It is," I said firmly. "I overheard him. But I can't take him down with suspicions. I need facts." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'll do it." That was the first brick in my defense. Over the next month, I played the part of the clueless partner, while Ethan grew bolder. He thought I wasn't paying attention, and that was exactly what I wanted. He started shifting money into new projects that had no clear purpose. He invited board members out to dinners I wasn't included in. He even hinted in staff meetings that changes were coming soon, though he never said what those changes were. And every time, Jenna slipped me the paperwork. At night, when the house was quiet and my wife asleep, I sat at my desk in the study, combing through contracts and spreadsheets. Slowly, the picture became clearer. Ethan wasn't just cutting me out. He was building a case to make me look incompetent. He had signed a series of bad contracts designed to bleed the company, and when the losses showed up on the books, he planned to pin them on me. The realization made my blood run cold. He wasn't just betraying me, he was framing me. That's when I decided to stop just collecting evidence and start planting it. I created a shadow folder on the server, one only I had access to. In it, I began storing duplicates of every suspicious document with timestamps. But I didn't stop there. I started quietly recording our private meetings. Every time Ethan made a casual remark about the board backing me soon, or Michael being out of the picture, I had it on tape. Still, I knew it wasn't enough. Ethan was charming, persuasive. He could talk his way out of almost anything. If I was going to survive this, I needed a trap so airtight he couldn't wriggle free. The opportunity came one Friday evening. Ethan asked me to meet him in his office after hours. His tone was light, almost jovial, but I could sense the tension beneath it. When I walked in, he closed the door and leaned against his desk. "Michael," he began, "you know I've always valued our partnership, but lately, I think the company needs new direction. You've been playing it safe, and I respect that, but I'm ready to take bigger risks." I sat silently, letting him talk. He went on, outlining his vision: expansion into risky markets, aggressive borrowing, partnerships with suppliers I knew were unreliable. And then he said it. "I'm planning to present this to the board next month. I'd love for you to back me. But if you can't, well, maybe it's time we reevaluate how we divide responsibilities here." It was phrased gently, almost like a suggestion, but the message was clear: step aside or be shoved. I nodded slowly, masking the storm brewing inside me. "I hear you, Ethan. Let me think about it." He smiled, satisfied. "Good. I knew you'd see reason." What he didn't know was that my phone, tucked neatly in my jacket pocket, was recording every word. That night, as I replayed the recording in my study, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting. I was in control. Ethan thought I was blind, but he had no idea the walls were closing in. And as I leaned back in my chair, I whispered to myself, "You wanted a war, Ethan? You just got one." The next few weeks were some of the longest of my life. Every day felt like a balancing act. Smile in the morning, pretend to trust Ethan, all while hiding the growing arsenal of evidence I had built against him. I knew I couldn't act too soon. If I made a move without solid proof, he'd spin it as paranoia or insecurity. He was smooth, always had been. He could charm investors with half-truths and turn colleagues into allies with nothing more than a drink and a joke. I needed him to incriminate himself further, to leave no doubt. That's when I decided to bait him. I arranged a casual lunch one afternoon, just the two of us at a restaurant we'd frequented for years. Over steaks and wine, I pretended to loosen up. I asked him about the new opportunities he kept hinting at. He grinned, leaning in, his voice low. "Michael, you've always been a bit cautious. That's why I need to move ahead without you on some of these deals. But the truth?
Once they're set up, the board will see the results, and they'll have no choice but to back me. You'll thank me later." I nodded, forcing a chuckle. "And what if they don't?" He shrugged. "Then they'll see that you were holding us back. And frankly, I don't think you'll be around to explain yourself." My stomach clenched, but outwardly I smiled. Inside, I savored the moment, because my watch, sleek and subtle, was recording everything. That lunch became another piece of the puzzle. But Ethan wasn't the only one I needed to keep close. The board mattered too. Quietly, I began reaching out to them, casually, informally. A dinner here, a golf game there. I never mentioned Ethan directly, never accused. I just planted seeds. "Have you noticed Ethan pushing new deals?" Or, "I've been looking over the financials. Some numbers seem unusual." They didn't say much in response, but I could see the doubt beginning to flicker in their eyes. That was enough for now. At the same time, I strengthened my alliance with Jenna. She was my eyes and ears in the office.
One evening, she brought me a folder, her hands trembling slightly. "Michael," she whispered, "you need to see this." Inside were drafts of contracts Ethan hadn't shared with me, agreements that funneled money into shell companies, companies that, when I traced them late into the night, led back to names connected to him. Cousins, old college friends, people who would hold assets in their name while funneling kickbacks back to him. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. That night, I sat staring at the documents spread across my desk, the numbers blurring together. Part of me wanted to storm into his office the next morning and throw it all in his face, to watch him squirm, to demand answers. But another part of me, the colder, smarter part, knew better. If I confronted him, he'd bury the evidence, twist the story, and I'd lose my chance forever. No, this needed patience, precision. And then, as if fate wanted to hand me the perfect weapon, Ethan made a mistake. One Monday morning, he walked into my office, flashing that familiar grin. "Big news, partner. I'm heading to Vegas this week, meeting some investors. High rollers. This could be the start of something huge." I nodded casually, but as soon as he left, Jenna slipped me an email she'd intercepted. It wasn't just Vegas. He had a meeting scheduled with a competitor, a company that had been trying to poach our clients for years. And the email was clear. Ethan was offering to hand over key contracts in exchange for a personal stake. Betrayal had a name, and now it had proof. That evening, as I sat in my study, I played back the recordings, spread the contracts across the desk, and stared at the damning email. My pulse raced. This was it. This was the kind of evidence that could crush him. But I also knew Ethan wasn't stupid. He'd never put his name directly on anything. He always operated through proxies, always left just enough deniability. If I wanted to destroy him, I needed to catch him in the act, red-handed. That night, I called a contact I hadn't spoken to in years, Marcus, an old college buddy who now worked in private investigations. "Michael," he said when he picked up, "it's been a while. What's going on?" I hesitated, then answered in a low voice. "I need surveillance, discreet, fast, and I can't afford mistakes." There was silence for a moment. Then Marcus replied, "Sounds like trouble." "It is," I admitted, "and if I don't handle it right, I'll lose everything." He sighed. "All right, tell me where and when." I gave him the details of Ethan's Vegas trip, and when I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. For weeks I had been gathering evidence, building a quiet case. But now the plan shifted. Now it wasn't just defense, it was offense. Ethan thought he was one step away from victory. What he didn't know was that the ground beneath his feet was already cracking, and I was the one holding the hammer. The days leading up to Ethan's Vegas trip felt like a storm quietly building on the horizon. Outwardly, I played the same role I'd been perfecting for months, smiling, nodding, pretending I was the partner who trusted him unconditionally. Inwardly,
Every nerve in my body buzzed with anticipation. Marcus, my old college friend, didn't waste time. 2 days after our call, he flew into town, and we met in a dimly lit cafe far from the office. He looked older than I remembered, gray streaks in his beard, a sharper edge in his eyes, but he still had that same calm, analytical presence that had made him such a good chess player back in the day. "You weren't exaggerating," he said after scanning the documents and recordings I'd shown him. "This isn't just betrayal. It's corporate espionage." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "That's why I need you to help me catch him in the act. He's meeting a competitor in Vegas. If we can document it, video, audio, the works, I can bring him down. No more speculation, no more doubts." Marcus nodded slowly. "All right, but you need to understand something, Michael. Once we do this, there's no going back. He'll know it was you who set the trap." I clenched my fists under the table. "I know. I've made my peace with that. He chose this path when he betrayed me." The plan came together quickly. Marcus would handle the surveillance, discreetly tracking Ethan's movements in Vegas. I would stay behind, covering my role at the company so Ethan suspected nothing. We decided that if Ethan met with the competitor as planned, Marcus would record everything, from the handshake to the contract exchange. The night before Ethan left, we had one last drink at his house. He was unusually cheerful, bragging about the big break he was about to secure. "To us," he said, raising his glass, "the future's brighter than ever." I forced a smile, clinking my glass against his. "To us," I echoed, though inside I tasted nothing but bitterness.
The next morning, he boarded his flight, oblivious to the fact that every step he took was now being shadowed. Marcus kept me updated in coded texts. Subject arrived. Meeting scheduled. Then later, dinner at Bellagio. Not the target yet. Each message tightened the knot in my stomach. I barely slept, pacing my study at night, staring at the phone like a lifeline. Finally, on the third evening, the message came through. Target acquired. Competitor CEO present. Recording in progress. I froze, my heart hammering. This was it. Months of pretending, of swallowing my rage, of plotting in silence, all boiling down to this moment. I wanted to call Marcus right then, to demand details, but I resisted. The last thing I could do was spook him or risk Ethan catching a whiff of the operation. Hours later, I finally got the call. "Got him," Marcus said, his voice steady, clear as day. He handed over documents, promised client transfers, and in return, the competitor agreed to cut him in. Everything's on tape. I sat back in my chair, closing my eyes. For the first time in months, I let out a long, shaky breath. Relief washed over me, but it was mixed with something darker, cold, simmering fury. Ethan had just signed his own death warrant. But the victory wasn't complete yet. Evidence was power, but only if I used it wisely. If I moved too fast, Ethan might claim it was fabricated. If I hesitated too long, he might still find a way to cover his tracks. Timing was everything. The next morning, Ethan returned to the office, looking smug, as if he had the world in his pocket. He slapped my back, laughing. "Vegas, my friend, what a trip! You wouldn't believe the kind of deals I've lined up." I smiled thinly. "I'm sure I'll find out soon enough." He didn't notice the edge in my tone. He never did. That afternoon, Jenna walked into my office. She shut the door behind her, eyes wide. "Michael, he's starting to move money again. Big transfers. I think he's getting ready to make his exit." I felt the weight of her words like a stone in my gut. Ethan wasn't just playing games anymore. He was accelerating. If I didn't act soon, he might vanish with millions and leave me standing in the ruins. I looked at the folder Marcus had handed me, sitting on the corner of my desk. Inside were photos, videos, recordings, everything I needed to destroy Ethan. The question was no longer if I would act, it was when. And with Ethan growing bolder, that moment was approaching faster than I had ever imagined. When Marcus handed me the evidence, I knew I held a loaded weapon. but pulling the trigger recklessly could backfire. Ethan wasn't just some careless thief. He was cunning, manipulative, and charming. Half the board adored him. If I walked in waving documents without preparing the ground, he might twist the narrative, call me paranoid, or even fabricate counter-accusations. I needed to build a stage so airtight that when Ethan fell, there'd be no cracks to crawl through. The first step was to quietly test the waters with the people who mattered most, the board members who still respected me. One evening, I invited Jenna to join me at my home office. She had become more than an assistant. She was my confidant in this storm. "I need you to help me gauge where everyone stands," I said, showing her a list of names. She leaned over, scanning the paper. "Mr. Wallace has always backed you. Same with Karen. But Thomas, he's unpredictable. And Lydia, Ethan has her wrapped around his finger." I nodded grimly. "Then I'll start with Wallace. If I can get him to see the truth, others will follow." The next morning, I arranged a private meeting with Wallace under the guise of discussing expansion strategies. He was an old-school businessman, skeptical by nature, but he valued loyalty above all else. Over coffee, I steered the conversation toward the company's financial future. Then, carefully, I dropped the first breadcrumb. "Wallace, do you ever feel like not everything Ethan says adds up? His sudden wealth, the trips, the deals he keeps close to his chest?" Wallace raised an eyebrow. "I've wondered, but he delivers results, Michael. That's what the others see." I pulled out a single photo Marcus had given me, not the whole folder, just one image, of Ethan shaking hands with the competitor CEO. Wallace leaned in, frowning. "That doesn't look like a casual dinner," he muttered. "It isn't," I said quietly. "I'll show you more when the time is right. But I need to know, when I reveal everything, will you stand with me?" He stared at me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "If what you're saying is true, then yes. Betrayal like that can't be forgiven." It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. Over the next week, I repeated the process: subtle conversations, careful hints, selective evidence. Karen was horrified when I showed her snippets of the bank transfers.
Thomas remained evasive, unwilling to take a side. Lydia, as Jenna predicted, dismissed me outright, insisting Ethan was the backbone of the company. Every night I reported back to Marcus, who reminded me to stay patient. "You don't need everyone," he said. "You just need enough of the right people to tip the balance." But patience was harder than ever. Ethan's behavior grew bolder by the day. He strutted around the office, making jokes at my expense, basking in attention. One afternoon, I overheard him telling Lydia, "Michael's too old-fashioned. He doesn't have the guts for big moves. Stick with me. I know how to win." The words burned, but I forced myself to stay calm. The angrier he got, the more reckless he became, and reckless men make mistakes. Then an opportunity presented itself. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled in 2 weeks. Normally, it was a routine affair, updates, projections, polite discussions. But this time, it would be the perfect arena. Every decision-maker in one room, every eye focused on the leadership of the company. That was when I would strike. I began preparing meticulously. Marcus compiled the evidence into a seamless presentation. Videos, recordings, timelines, bank records, all tied together like threads in a noose. I rehearsed my speech late into the night, making sure every word carried weight. Still, there were moments of doubt. Sometimes, staring at Ethan's smiling face in old photographs, back when we were just two ambitious young men with big dreams, I wondered if I was ready for what was coming. Because once I exposed him, there would be no going back. No friendship, no forgiveness, just scorched earth. One night, Jenna caught me staring at those photos. She touched my shoulder gently. "Michael, you're not the one destroying this friendship. He is. You're just making sure he doesn't destroy you along with it." Her words steadied me. The final detail was ensuring Ethan wouldn't suspect a thing. So I played my role to perfection, laughing at his jokes, nodding during his presentations, pretending nothing had changed. But deep inside, I was coiled like a spring, waiting for the moment when all masks would come off. And when that day arrived, I promised myself the truth wouldn't just come out quietly. It would thunder through that boardroom like a storm. The day of the quarterly meeting arrived like a storm I had been watching crawl across the horizon. For 2 weeks I lived with a knot in my stomach, rehearsing every word, every pause, every glance. And yet, when I woke up that morning, there was a strange calmness in me, as if my body finally understood the inevitability of what was about to unfold. I dressed deliberately, sharp navy suit, white shirt, silver tie. Not flashy, but commanding. A reminder to everyone in that room that I wasn't just some relic clinging to the past. I was still Michael Carter, the founder of this company, and today I was taking back my ground. Jenna handed me the neatly organized folder before I left. Inside, Marcus's masterpiece, evidence layered with precision, a narrative no one could dispute. "You ready?" she whispered. "Whatever happens, you'll walk out of there stronger." At the boardroom, Ethan was already holding court. He leaned back in his chair, laughing with Lydia and a few others, oozing confidence. When he saw me, he smirked, as if I were a formality, a shadow at the edges of his spotlight. "Michael," he said casually, "good to see you. I was just telling the team about an exciting partnership I've been exploring." His arrogance didn't sting this time. It fueled me. I simply nodded and took my seat, placing the folder in front of me with deliberate calm. The meeting began like every other: numbers, charts, projections. Ethan stood to present, his voice booming, slides flashing behind him. He spoke of vision, of bold moves, painting himself as the company's savior. Board members leaned in, captivated by his energy. But I noticed something else, too. Wallace glanced at me occasionally, waiting. Karen tapped her pen nervously. Even Thomas, who had remained neutral, shifted in his chair as Ethan bragged about solo negotiations with overseas investors. When Ethan finished, the room erupted in polite applause. He sat down, shooting me a smug look, daring me to follow that performance. I rose slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. My hands didn't shake. My voice, when it came, was steady but sharp. "Thank you, Ethan," I began. "You've given us a glimpse of your vision. Now, I'd like to share mine. Not a vision of where we could go, but of where we actually are." A murmur rippled across the table. I clicked the remote, and the screen behind me lit up. At first, it was subtle bank transactions, small anomalies. Then, documents linking Ethan to a competitor, photos of secret meetings, a recording of him promising insider access in exchange for money. The room fell silent. Ethan's smile froze, then slowly slipped away.
"These aren't mistakes," I continued, voice tightening. "This is betrayal. A deliberate effort to bleed this company for personal gain, to hand over our future to competitors while lining his pockets." Gasps erupted. Karen shook her head in disbelief. Wallace leaned forward, fists clenched. Lydia looked from Ethan to me, her face pale. Ethan jumped to his feet, fury in his eyes. "This is nonsense," he barked. "Michael's bitter, desperate, trying to cling to relevance. These documents are fabricated." I didn't flinch. Instead, I calmly held up the folder. Every piece of evidence has been verified by third parties, by Marcus Gray, one of the most respected investigators in this field. If anyone wants further proof, I'll provide access immediately. I looked around the table, meeting every eye. This isn't about me or about pride. It's about trust, about whether we allow greed and treachery to lead us, or whether we protect what we've built together. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence was suffocating. Then Wallace spoke. His voice was low but firm. "I've seen enough. This company can't survive under the leadership of a traitor." Karen nodded, tears in her eyes. "I trusted you, Ethan. We all did." Ethan turned on me, his mask slipping. "You think this makes you a hero? You've destroyed everything we worked for."
"No," I said quietly. "You destroyed it when you chose betrayal over loyalty." The boardroom erupted into voices, some angry, some shocked, all directed at Ethan. He tried to argue, to deflect, but the tide had turned. For the first time, his charm failed him. And as I stood there, watching his empire crumble, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. This was only the beginning of his downfall, but already I could see the fear flickering in his eyes. Fear of consequences he could no longer escape. The moment Wallace and Karen spoke out, Ethan's mask cracked. But if I thought he would fold easily, I underestimated his audacity. He wasn't just a betrayer. He was a survivor, and survivors fight tooth and nail, even when cornered. He slammed his palms on the table, his voice dripping with fury. "You're all being manipulated. Don't you see what's happening? Michael is bitter, jealous. He built this company decades ago, but times have changed. He can't keep up, and now he's trying to drag me down with him." His words sliced through the air like daggers, and for a brief second I saw doubt flicker in a few faces around the table. Ethan pounced on it. "Think about it," he pressed. "How convenient that these so-called documents suddenly appear now. How convenient that Marcus Gray, Michael's personal friend, is the one verifying them. This is a witch hunt, an old man afraid of being replaced." I clenched my jaw. This was his weapon, gaslighting, twisting truth until it bent in his favor. But I wasn't the same man I had been weeks ago. I was ready. I calmly flipped to the next page in my presentation. "If this is a witch hunt, Ethan, then explain this." The screen displayed a series of email exchanges. His words, his promises, his deals. Not hearsay, not speculation. His own voice, unfiltered. Karen gasped. Wallace muttered, "Unbelievable." Ethan's face turned red, but he didn't give up. "Those could be doctored," he shouted. "Anyone can fake an email." I didn't break eye contact. "Then perhaps you'd like to explain the wire transfers, the hotel records, the photographs taken last Tuesday when you claimed to be on a flight overseas." The room erupted in whispers. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. He realized his lies were collapsing, brick by brick. Still, he tried one last card. "You want to believe Michael? Fine. But ask yourselves, who's really capable of leading this company forward? An aging founder stuck in the past, or me? I brought in the biggest deals of the last 2 years. I doubled our profits while he was stuck reviewing outdated strategies. Without me, this company crumbles." For a moment, silence held. It was his best argument, and he knew it. He wasn't just appealing to ego, he was appealing to fear. Fear of losing money, power, success. I let the silence linger, then spoke. My voice was quiet, but heavy with conviction. "Success means nothing if it's built on betrayal. You doubled profits, yes, but you were selling us out in the process. Every deal you brag about was just a step closer to dismantling what we worked decades to build. If the foundation rots, the whole structure collapses." I paused, scanning the faces around the table. This company was founded on trust, on loyalty, on the belief that we were stronger together. Ethan doesn't believe in any of that. And if you let him, he will strip this company bare until nothing is left but ashes. Wallace stood abruptly. "Enough. I've heard all I need. We need to vote." Lydia, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. Her voice trembled. "Ethan, did you really do all of this?" Ethan turned to her, desperation in his eyes. "Lydia, you know me. You know me. Don't let him poison you. Think of everything we've built together." Her face hardened. "I thought I did know you. But now I don't recognize the man sitting here." Ethan's lips tightened into a thin line. He realized he was losing her, losing everyone.
Karen leaned forward. Michael's right. This company can't afford to be led by someone we can't trust. Ethan spun back to me, his voice dropping into a venomous hiss. You think you've won, Michael? This isn't over. Not by a long shot. I held his stare. It ends today. Not because I say so, but because the truth leaves us no choice. The board murmured, the weight of decision pressing down on all of them. Wallace motioned to the secretary, "Prepare the ballots." Ethan sat back, fists clenched, jaw tight, his bravado finally cracking under the pressure. He looked less like a powerful executive now, and more like a drowning man, clawing for breath as the tide pulled him under. And in that moment, I knew, whatever the outcome, Ethan's reign of deceit was collapsing before our very eyes. The ballots were passed around the table, the silence almost suffocating. Each board member leaned forward, scribbling their decision, folding the paper and sliding it toward Wallace. Ethan sat rigid, his knuckles white as he clenched his fists. He wasn't used to waiting. He was used to winning. Wallace cleared his throat as the secretary collected the votes. One by one, she opened them and read the decisions aloud, her voice echoing through the tense boardroom. Remove Ethan Carter from his position as CEO. Remove. Remove. 3 strikes already. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then 1. Retain. He smirked, clinging desperately to the sliver of hope. But the tide didn't turn. Remove. 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 By the time the 7th vote was announced, the result was inevitable. Ethan slumped back in his chair, his face pale. Wallace rose, solemn. By majority decision, Ethan Carter is hereby removed from his role as CEO, effective immediately. The words landed like a gavel strike. Final. Unshakable. Ethan exploded. You fools! You think you can run this company without me? You'll be bankrupt in 6 months. He stood, pacing like a caged animal. His voice was no longer persuasive. It was feral, unhinged. You'll regret this, every one of you. You'll crawl back to me, begging for help. I leaned forward, speaking calmly but firmly. The only one who'll be crawling, Ethan, is you, when the authorities start asking questions. Because this isn't just about betrayal. It's fraud. It's theft. And I have every piece of evidence they need. His eyes darted to me, wide with rage. You set me up? I shook my head. No, you set yourself up the moment you decided greed was worth more than loyalty. He lunged forward, slamming his fists on the table, inches from my face. You think you're better than me? You think this company is yours? Without me, you're nothing. Security moved closer, ready to intervene. But I didn't flinch. I built this company on trust, something you never understood. That's why you've already lost, Ethan. Not just your position, not just your wealth. You've lost the one thing you can never buy back. Respect. The room fell silent. Even Ethan's breathing was ragged, as if the fight had drained from him in that moment. Wallace gave the signal, and 2 security guards stepped forward. Mr. Carter, you need to leave the premises. Ethan resisted, jerking his arms, his face twisted with fury. You'll regret this, Michael. You all will. I'll drag this company into the dirt before I let you win. But his words sounded hollow now, the roar of a man who had lost his throne. The guards escorted him out, his protests echoing down the corridor until the heavy doors slammed shut. The room exhaled collectively. Shoulders slumped. Whispers filled the air. For the first time in weeks, there was a sense of relief. Wallace turned to me. Michael, that was remarkable. You stood tall against him. Without your preparation, I fear we would have all been blind to his deception. Karen nodded. It's not just that you exposed him. You reminded us what this company was meant to be. Their words warmed me, but inside I felt something heavier, a deep ache. Because as much as this was a victory, it was also a reminder. Betrayal never comes from enemies. It comes from the people we let closest to us. I thought of the long nights Ethan and I had spent building this empire,
side by side. I thought of the trust I had once placed in him, and how easily he had shattered it. But I also thought of Emily, my daughter, waiting at home. She had watched me fight this battle, unsure if I would emerge whole. Now, for the first time, I could go back to her with my head held high. The board began to disperse, murmuring among themselves.
But as I gathered my papers, I knew this wasn't just about saving a company. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about showing my daughter that no betrayal, no matter how sharp, could destroy me. And as I stepped out of that boardroom, the air felt lighter. The storm had passed, and though scars remained, I was still standing. When I finally walked out of that boardroom, it felt like stepping out of a storm and into calm air. For weeks, I had lived under constant pressure, waiting for the next scheme, the next betrayal, the next blow from Ethan. Now, for the first time, the weight was gone. But peace doesn't arrive instantly. It lingers at the edge, testing if you're ready to embrace it. I drove home in silence that evening, the city lights flickering past my window. My thoughts kept replaying the look in Ethan's eyes as he was dragged out of the room. Rage, fear, disbelief. That same man had once been my closest ally, the one I trusted more than anyone. We had shared victories, celebrated milestones, and leaned on each other through the darkest nights of building the company. Yet, here we were. When I stepped inside my house, Emily was waiting for me on the couch, her laptop closed for once. The moment she saw me, she jumped up. "Dad, how did it go?" I smiled faintly. "It's over. He's gone." She exhaled with relief, her shoulders dropping. She ran over and hugged me tightly, her voice muffled against my chest. "I knew you'd make it through. I'm so proud of you." Her words hit deeper than she could ever know. For all the chaos, for all the nights I felt like giving up, this moment with my daughter was what made it all worth it. We sat down together, and she looked at me with curiosity. "Do you think he'll try to come back?" I shook my head. "No. Ethan burned every bridge he had, and even if he tried, the truth will always follow him now. He can't escape what he did." She nodded thoughtfully. "It must hurt, though. I mean, someone you trusted, betraying you like that." Her honesty cut straight through me. I took a long breath before answering. "It does hurt, Emily, more than I can explain. But life has a way of testing us. People will betray us, sometimes the ones we least expect. What matters is not the betrayal itself, but how we respond. Do we let it break us, or do we stand tall and refuse to let their lies define us?" She leaned against me, her voice soft. "You stood tall." I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, holding her close. "Because of you. I needed you to believe in me when I almost stopped believing in myself. Never forget this, Emily. When the world feels like it's collapsing, the truth is the only anchor worth holding on to." For the next few days, the news of Ethan's removal spread like wildfire. Headlines called it one of the most shocking corporate oustings of the decade. Some painted him as a fallen genius, others as a fraud finally unmasked. But me? I didn't need the headlines to validate what happened. I had already seen the truth in that boardroom, and I carried the scars to prove it. The company stabilized faster than I expected. Investors regained confidence, employees worked with renewed energy, and the board began to rally behind me. But I didn't fool myself into thinking it would be easy. Trust takes years to build and only seconds to destroy. Rebuilding it would take time. Yet, as I stood in my office, watching the city skyline, I felt a strange sense of gratitude. Ethan's betrayal had broken me in ways I never thought possible, but it also forced me to rebuild stronger. It reminded me that no empire, no matter how big, is worth more than integrity. And maybe that was the real lesson I needed all along. Now, as I share this story with you, I want to leave you with something important. If you've ever been betrayed, if someone you trusted deeply turned against you, I know the pain you carry. I've lived it. But hear me clearly. You are stronger than that betrayal. You are more than the lies that were told about you. And if you believe in justice, in truth, and in standing tall no matter how hard life tries to break you, then this is where I ask you, subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Because together, we can prove that betrayal doesn't get the final word. Resilience does.
Emily walked into my office later that evening, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She handed one to me, smiling. "So, Dad, what now?" I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. For the first time in months, I answered without hesitation. Now, we rebuild. Together. And for once, I wasn't just talking about a company.